Having pets is immoral. At least, that's the thesis of a paper that I came across that was recently published in a top philosophy journal. And as a philosopher / longtime dog lover and dog owner myself, I figured I should probably take a look at it and see if the argument was any good. Because if it turns out that owning pets really is immoral, then I'd kind of like to know about it and, I don't know, be sad about it, I guess? Jeez, it can't be right. It can't be that owning pets is immoral. That's just crazy, right? Let's talk about it today on Frank Philosophy, where we'll be speaking frankly about the morality of pet ownership. So just to give you a sense of the scope of this issue, about 51% of US households own a dog, and another 37% own a cat. And all told, there are around 90 million dogs in the United States and 74 million cats. So if it turns out that owning these fuzzy companions and all other companions, fuzzy or non-fuzzy, is immoral, then we're in serious trouble. A lot of us, both human and non-human, are in ethical limbo. And before you try to take comfort in the scope of the issue to say something like, well, not everybody can be wrong about pet ownership, consider another institution that until very recently was deemed morally acceptable, or at least socially necessary: slavery. We all agree that slavery is awful. It's immoral. It's totally unjustifiable. It's a stain on human history. And yet it persisted for millennia until surprisingly and frighteningly recently. So yeah, the fact that something is widespread is definitely not good evidence that it's morally okay. I mean, it's some evidence, but certainly not conclusive. And it could very well be the case that pet ownership as an institution is just a fuzzy form of slavery. And so in this recently published paper in Philosophers Imprint by philosophers Richard Healey and Angie, the authors ask if pet ownership is morally justifiable. And their answer is no, it's not. It's immoral no matter how much we love our pets and no matter how good we are to them. It's just immoral in principle. So in this video, I'd like to look at the reasons they offer and explore if they're actually any good. Okay, spoiler alert, cards on the table here. I don't buy it. I don't think the arguments work, and I'm going to explain why. I think the counterarguments are stronger and that it's a-okay to own pets. So don't leave any mean comments below about me if you're a pet owner or a dog lover or a cat lover or a fish lover or a hamster lover. Whatever. It's all fine by me, morally speaking, at the institutional level. But still, it's an interesting paper, and I think it's one worth engaging because it makes us think really hard about the fact that we do have a ton of power over our pets, and it should be justified. And if it isn't, that really would be a big issue. And also, one of the jobs of philosophy is just to engage with arguments no matter how crazy they may seem, and examine whether or not they cut the mustard. So yeah, we're going to walk through their argument as best as I can reconstruct it, hopefully charitably, and then we're going to see where I think it doesn't hold up. So the first thing we want to do is motivate the question of why anyone would think that owning pets as an institution is immoral. I mean, how do we even get there? Because the authors aren't saying that some pet ownership is immoral because some people are bad pet owners. No, they're saying that the whole institution of owning animals as pets is immoral. It's unjustifiable. And what sort of underlying assumptions would lead anyone to even start to think that? Well, for one thing, we want to recognize that pets are moral subjects. And this is something that everybody agrees with. Our pets have feelings, they have preferences, they have personalities. They have an inner psychological life that makes them worthy of respect. This is what it means to be a moral subject. Unlike a rock, say, it's possible to mistreat a dog or a cat because it's also possible to treat them with respect and treat them well. A second thing to notice is that we have a lot of power over pets. We get to decide when, where, and what they eat, when they go out, when they do their business, when they sleep, who they get to socialize with. And we have all sorts of physical tools to help us do it, like leashes, fences, crates, muzzles, and all manner of other creative ways of keeping our creatures where we want them to be. We even make all their medical decisions. And furthermore, this power relationship is involuntary from the pet's perspective. We get to choose whether to get a cat and which cat we would like to have when we go down to the adoption agency or to the store to pick one out. The cat in question has no vote whatsoever. They can't leave us, they can't opt out, they can't say no. And this is very different from the kind of power relationship that we find ourselves in as human beings with, say, our bosses. In those cases, we voluntarily sign a contract to be under the power of our bosses, to be under their authority, at least during working hours. And if we don't like our situation at our job, we can quit. It might be difficult to do this for a variety of reasons, but at least we can do it at the end of the day, and we are legally entitled to do it. But pets, on the other hand, can't quit being our pets. They are our pets when we decide, and they stop being our pets when we decide. So we have extensive, absolute, asymmetrical power over these morally mattering beings. And so the question raised by Healey and Pepper is if this power is ever morally justified. And their answer is no. And they give three main reasons to support this conclusion. The first reason is that we caused the problem that pet ownership is now solving. They call this the source constraint, and it works like this. Power is usually justified by appealing to the subject's interests. So think about parents and children. Generally, the power that parents have over their children is justified by the fact that eventually the child will benefit from the exercise of parental power and authority over them. And furthermore, eventually a child will grow up and no longer be under parental authority and will instead be a fully fledged, free, and autonomous individual. Now we can try and run the same argument for pets, or at least a similar one. Imagine the majestic dachshund. Within the context of a loving family, dachshunds are the happiest little hot dogs in the world. And if you put one in the wild, that would be like the cruelest thing in the world, because a dachshund wouldn't last a week in the wild. They're just not built for living in the woods, and if you saw one in the woods, you would think that it was being mistreated, or it was abandoned, or it would be cruel for it to be in the woods, and you would take it home and give it a loving, happy family. So we could make the case that owning a dachshund and keeping it in a loving home is actually in the dachshund's interest. Now the problem, the authors point out, is that we created this helplessness. Through tens of thousands of years of selective breeding, wolves, which were perfectly happy in the wild, and other forms of wild dogs, became domesticated to the point where now they can't survive in the wild, and instead they need to live with human beings. So in a sense, we engineered their dependence, and then used the fact that they benefit from depending on us to justify our dominance and control over them. And when you put it that way, it's kind of twisted. I mean, think about a doctor who poisons her own patient. Only she knows the antidote or the procedure that needs to be done to save the patient. And so she takes charge of the case to treat the patient and orders around the nurses and the other doctors and tells the patient what to do. And in that case, her authority is necessary. But this doesn't mean that the doctor's position of authority is morally justified, because it wouldn't need to exist if she didn't poison the patient in the first place. The fact that her direction becomes necessary doesn't mean that it's therefore justified or moral. And so we can apply the same logic with pets. We cause the fact that they depend on us, so our solution of taking care of them is rooted in a fundamentally immoral situation to begin with. The second reason is that we constantly override our pets' will. Pets have real preferences. Dogs want to go for walks, or chase squirrels, or eat food, or have a nap. Cats want to knock a glass off the table, or get into all other manners of mischief. And these are real desires that belong to beings that matter morally. And pet owners override all of these preferences always, as a matter of principle. We decide where they go, what they do, when and what they eat, when they sleep. We make medical decisions about them, like whether or not to go for an expensive treatment or euthanized near the end of their lives. And the scope of our ability to just completely override their preferences is a problem for the authors of this paper. A moral being's self-determination matters, morally, and pets get essentially none. And if we try to say that we're overriding their preferences for their own good, then we're just back to the first reason, the source constraint, because it's our fault that what we do for them, or what we have to do for them, is for their own good. A third reason they offer is that pet ownership puts pets at unnecessary risk. It's just dangerous for them, because there's a real chance that they'll be stuck with an owner that's cruel to them, or mistreats them, or abuses them, or neglects them. Pets are completely dependent on their owners for everything. Food, shelter, healthcare, exercise, stimulation, contact. We're not just their resources, we're their entire worlds. And they have no backup plans, no contingency, nowhere else they can turn to. So if they're stuck with a bad family, they have no recourse. And that's a big risk. So we've basically manufactured their dependence on human families to provide for them. And we also expose them to the risk that they'll end up with a family that doesn't or can't provide for them. And that whole system is morally unjust, according to the authors. So the argument here is structural about the entire institution of pet ownership. It's not just about bad owners, backyard breeders, or puppy mills. That stuff is really bad, obviously. But the point being made here is broader. Even in the case of good owners, the power that they have over their pets is inherently unjustifiable from a moral perspective. And therefore, reforming the institution of pet ownership can't fix it. The only solution is abolition. And that's what the authors argue for, abolishing the institution of pet ownership. Now, this is a serious argument. It's a serious paper in a serious journal written by serious philosophers. We should take it seriously. And I think we have. But also, I think it fails. And here's why. So first of all, the source constraint, or maybe we can call it the you caused it principle, just proves too much. It sounds like a good slogan, right? If you cause the problem, then you can't legitimately wield the power to fix it. But it falls apart on closer scrutiny, because it doesn't work in many situations that we accept. So to give you an example, think about public health. Arguably, governments and food industry corporations caused, or at least massively contributed to, the obesity epidemic. And now these very same governments are exercising power to fix it by instituting things like sugar taxes, or regulations on portion sizes, or regulations on advertisements, or other sorts of campaigns. They're using state power to fix a problem that arguably they caused, or at least contributed to. Now, by the source constraint, or the you caused it principle, this wielding of their power is illegitimate. But I think most of us would disagree. And very often we think the opposite. If you broke it, you should be the one to fix it, right? So if we're responsible for putting pets in this situation of total dependence, then we might actually be obligated to take care of them to the best of our abilities, and not just abandon them due to the original sin of domestication, however many tens of thousands of years ago that began. So yeah, the principle is too blunt, and we don't apply it anywhere else, and it's suspicious to only deploy it in the case of pet ownership. Another reply is that our pets seem genuinely happy and living good lives when they're in good family environments. And the authors just sort of brush this aside due again to the source constraint. I think the authors are worried about a sort of Stockholm syndrome situation, where the only reason that pets love us or seem to love us is because they don't have a choice. In a sense, their preferences have been socialized and domesticated over tens of thousands of years of evolution, and they don't really reflect the pet's genuine interest. But I don't think this argument works either, because all of our preferences are socialized. Every social being has socialized preferences. I mean, our politics, our career, the music we listen to, the foods we like, who we're attracted to. All of this is socially constructed in large part. None of it is chosen from an asocialized or unsocialized blank slate. So if pets' socialized or domesticated preferences don't count, then nobody's preferences count. And this idea of not taking our pets' observed preferences seriously goes against the science. There's empirical evidence that shows that dogs will choose human contact over food in controlled experiments. Not to mention that for the early history of dog and cat domestication, these animals chose to hang out with us because it was beneficial to them to do so. So domestication didn't just make our animals tolerate us, it forged a genuine connection and companionship between us. There's also this implied premise that living in the wild is better for the animals. But if you've ever watched anything narrated by David Attenborough, you know that this isn't true. I mean, life in the wild is mostly brutal, short, and full of suffering. Most animals in the wild die before adulthood. Living in the wild isn't living in freedom, it's living in a state of perpetual starvation and predation and full of parasites and disease. So by owning pets, we're not depriving them of some better natural existence. Instead, we're giving them a thriving, happy, and flourishing existence that their ancestors never could have dreamed of. And that sounds like a pretty good deal. Another reply we could make is that if the argument actually works, I think, again, it proves too much. Namely, anarchism. The whole argument is built on an analogy between owners and pets on the one hand, and states and citizens on the other. The states and citizens' power dynamic is morally justified, while that between owners and their pets is not. But I think the analogy cuts both ways, and it's actually deeper than the authors give credit for. I mean, we never consented to be the subjects of our governments, for example. Countries exist usually due to a history of violent conquest and the elimination of alternatives. And the possibility of exiting one's country is, while technically possible, usually in practice really difficult. States actively cultivate our dependence on them through monopolies of force, through the legal systems, through infrastructures and other systems that keep us perpetually dependent on the state. And so again, we can argue the same way that the authors do, that because the state is responsible for creating the problems that we now rely on it to solve, it's also unjustified. And a good amount of political philosophers would agree with this. They're called anarchists. They believe that the state's authority over us is never morally justified. But the problem is that the authors don't seem to be anarchists themselves. So they have to be saying that state authority over citizens is okay, but owner authority over pets is not okay. But it's kind of hard to see the difference between the two that would make the moral difference. And a lot of standard replies to the anarchist critique of government seem like they would also apply to the case of the author's critique of pet ownership. For example, authority can be morally justified without the consent or volunteering of the people subjected to it if it provides benefits, if it protects their interests, or if reasonable beings would assent to it. And pet owners can easily make this argument. Pets clearly have wonderful lives in many situations. And so if this kind of reasoning is good enough to justify the state, I think it's good enough to justify the family dog. Another problem with the conclusion that owning pets is immoral is that the recommendation to abolish pet keeping is really underspecified. I mean, what would that even look like? The authors of this paper don't say, and of course it's not their job. I mean, they're just focused on the theoretical philosophy side of things. But if a recommendation is so unclear and fuzzy, and it's supposed to follow from a radical conclusion like owning pets is immoral, that might be an argument, implied anyway, against the theoretical philosophical side of things. In other words, if the theoretical result leads us to a practical conclusion that's impossible to put into effect, then maybe there's a problem with the theoretical result. So we'll just run through a couple of options here to see what abolishing pet ownership might actually look like and why it doesn't seem like any version of it makes any sense. So one option is to just give up all of our pets. Just give them over to shelters. Stop having pets as individuals. Now, the obvious problem with this is that our current pets are much better off with us than in a shelter. Everybody knows this. Shelters are stretched thin for resources, and a loving family is a much better environment for any pet. But supposedly we would be doing this for moral reasons, because owning pets is immoral. But at least with this option, it seems like the solution to this moral problem would actively harm the things that we're trying to protect by not behaving immorally towards them. So yeah, giving up our pets, that's not going to work. Another option would be to release our pets into the wild, to liberate them and have them go run around with all the other animals in the animal kingdom. But this would just be a death sentence, because most domesticated pets would just die very shortly afterwards, not to mention cause all sorts of environmental havoc as invasive species. So we would just be effectively murdering all of our pets while devastating ecosystems at the same time. So that's probably not going to work either. And the third option is to keep our current pets for as long as we have them, but just don't get any new ones. This would phase out the practice of pet ownership generationally. And it would be a humane solution because it wouldn't require us to actively harm the pets that we have currently. But as a solution, this has two problems. The first problem is that this really radical conclusion is leading to a not very radical bit of advice. I mean, the conclusion of the argument is that pet ownership is morally wrong. Therefore, keep treating your pets well. And that doesn't really have the practical force that's supposed to come from a conclusion as radically non-intuitive as owning pets is morally wrong. There just seems to be a mismatch there. But the bigger problem is that option 3 is really just option 1 in disguise. Because if we continue to look after our current pets, but don't get any new ones, then those pets that we would be getting are just going to end up in shelters anyway. We would effectively be cutting off potential future homes for animals that are bound to end up in shelters, leading to issues of resource scarcity for these animals and manpower limitations. So again, it seems like the most humane response to the conclusion that we should abolish the practice of pet ownership is just to keep doing what we're doing. But when a supposedly radical moral conclusion just leads to the status quo, well, something may have gone wrong. So again, major practical issues with trying to implement the abolition of pet ownership. It just doesn't seem like any version of it would work. So, is it immoral to have pets? I don't think so. It's no more morally compromised than any other institution that we participate in on the daily. Because if it really were immoral, then so would a lot of the rest of our lives be. Now that being said, I do think that this is an important paper and the authors are right to focus on this issue. There's a real philosophical discomfort regarding the power that we have over pets, and it's worth thinking about. And it's worth taking seriously the possibility that maybe it isn't morally justified. But I think that if it isn't morally justified, we're going to need better arguments to show why that is. Because the arguments offered here, again, are too strong. They'd cause us to have to throw out many more institutions than just pet ownership if they actually worked. And maybe they really do work, and maybe anarchism is right. But if we don't buy anarchism, then we should probably be okay with having a dog. So yeah, what do you think? Are the authors really onto something here and I'm just being uncharitable and biased because I'm a lifetime dog lover and dog owner? Or do the arguments not really work? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for more Frank Philosophy.